And then there's a little thing called the British Navy. From 1588, when it licked the Spanish Armada, to 1940, when we got moving on a two-ocean navy, the greatest battle fleet in the world. That, too, is manned almost entirely by men of Britain, the little island in the Atlantic, an island of seafarers. And the British Merchant Navy, still the greatest merchant navy in the world, in spite of all that Hitler can do.
Did your friends or yourself encounter any injuries or fatalities during your time in the Royal Navy?
Oh yeah, in Barry, we had an ammunition ship blow up in the docks, which is right alongside the base. It was such a violent explosion that the whole stern of a ship, not the ship that blew up, another ship, the whole stern traveled 500 yards and dropped into our base. And there were still people in the accommodation on that stern.
Hi everybody, my name is Zach Dunn from Global Veteran Stories, and before we get into our veteran story today, I just wanted to introduce myself and my project. Global Veteran Stories is a video documentary series I started back in 2021, dedicated to preserving the stories of World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam War veterans. Inspired by the story of my own granddad, who served in the Second World War in the British Airborne as a paratrooper in Northern Africa, Germany, and France. Now I want to tell you how you can help out with my mission. As of August 2024, I've interviewed over 50 veterans from 8 different countries, and my trips to interview these veterans are funded from people just like you. You can donate through my mission through Patreon, where you can set up a monthly donation subscription, or through my website or PayPal, where you can choose any dollar amount that you like. Right now, I'm a one-man show, and finding these veterans is becoming more and more difficult. So please, if you know a World War II, Korean War, or Vietnam War veteran, whether a family member, a friend, neighbor, or part of your community, please visit my website and fill out a contact form, and I would love to help preserve their stories. Every day, we lose more and more veterans. This history needs to be saved and preserved for future generations. Thank you so much for your support. Now, let's get into our veteran story. Dennis McNeill, born March 21st, 1925, in England. Dennis had 3 brothers who were all conscripted to serve during World War II. And when Dennis was of age, he decided to volunteer instead for the Navy. Dennis's Navy career took him across the North Sea and the Mediterranean, where he visited and was stationed in Malta and Italy. This video footage was filmed by Korean War veteran Andy Barber in Burlington, Ontario in 2007. Andy was so kind enough to share this video footage with me to share on my social media channels. We thank Dennis and Andy for their service, and we thank Andy again for giving me this opportunity to preserve Dennis's stories on video.
Well, Dennis, where, when, and why did you enlist?
I had 3 brothers, and they had all been conscripted, 2 in the Army, 1 in the Air Force. I didn't want to be in the infantry, and I didn't particularly want to go in the Air Force. And I know that if I waited to be conscripted, I would have no choice. So I decided to volunteer because I wanted to get into the Navy. And that's when I volunteered. When I first joined, I met up in a town called Preston with a bunch of other volunteers. Went by train down to Plymouth, and on that trip I got to know one young fellow very well, and he and I just hit it off and we became good friends. And unfortunately I didn't see him for many, many years, and I thought maybe he hadn't survived the war, but he did. And I've recently been in contact with him, and we're still in contact.
Was there an old chief petty officer that you were...
Oh, in training? Oh yeah, old Jack Hamilton, an old Scottish man. Been recalled back into the service, and great guy, a good trainer.
Where did you do your basic training?
In HMS Raleigh in Davenport, Devon. The name of the ship is HMS Raleigh. That's all bases have a name.
And did you go to a trade school, and if so, what trade?
Okay, I went through a test thing that they gave us, and it was suggested that I could be good for an air engine fitter. So I was sent first of all up to another base for a bit of education thing, then sent down to London to Fulham Gasworks to start the training for basic fitter. Well, we were lodged in a room of about, this sort of size of this little room here, with about 40 guys and 3-tier trunks, 3-tier bunks, and you can imagine the sort of stink at night. And after the course was at 4 months. After 2 months, I just couldn't stand it anymore, and asked for a transfer back to Seamen's Branch. So I never did complete that course.
And what ships did you serve in?
I only had one ship. That was an escort carrier, HMS Slinger, and we were mined in the North Sea. We didn't sink. We managed to keep it floating, but we wallowed around for 3 days waiting for a seagoing tug to bring us in, which they did eventually. But from then on, I never got another ship. I was sent out to the Mediterranean, to Malta, and from there I was sent to Italy as a relief driver. But nobody asked me if I could drive, and I couldn't. So anyway, I finished up as in charge of the transport section for the base in Bari, Italy, in the North Sea. We were heading up north to join a convoy, escort a convoy, a Russian convoy. So we never did get there.
Right. Was there any injuries aboard that?
Yeah, we had 3 or 4 men killed, and some slightly injured, nothing serious. One man in particular, I remember, I was on duty, I was on a gun crew, and one man came up from the mess decks, or the accommodation deck, in his pants, bare feet, and a singlet. And he would not go below the flight deck. But this was very, very cold weather, but he still wouldn't go below the flight deck. It took us 24 hours to get below the flight deck into one of the little rooms underneath. Escorted convoys. Well, it was a sister ship to Puncher. There was the Puncher, there was the Walker, anything ending in ER. There's quite a number of them. They were American ships, American built, welded construction, which was a good thing because when we hit the mine, had it been a riveted construction, I think it would have sunk. Being welded, it just sort of peeled open. Yeah. Oh, I had Italian drivers, English Navy drivers, Royal Marine drivers, and Army drivers. Yeah, quite a bunch.
Can you tell me a bit about the Maltese people, what they were?
Oh, great people. They worked hard, they were friendly, and they would certainly surprisingly, they went through all that siege and survived, and were still very friendly and nice people.
When you were in Bari, Italy, is there anything there, what were the people like there?
The Bari, they call Barese. And the Barese dialect, to me, it sounded like Chinese. It wasn't the Italian that you expect it to be, but it was good. And they were hard workers. They worked very hard, all the drivers.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you notice any tension between yourselves and them during been adversaries in World War II?
Only with one particular man, a man called Paresi. And he didn't like the British and so on, but he didn't stay with us too long.
Did your friends or yourself encounter any injuries or fatalities during your time in the Royal Navy?
Oh yeah, in Bari, we had an ammunition ship blow up in the docks, which was right alongside the base. And it was such a violent explosion that the whole stern of a ship, not the ship that blew up, another ship, the whole stern traveled 500 yards and dropped into our base. And there were still people in the accommodation on that stern. And another event, the beam from one of the ships traveled in the air for how long we're not quite sure, because when the explosion happened, we were in the dining hall, and some of us jumped out through windows into a little alleyway at the back. But then we left there, and it was afterwards that the beam dropped in that alleyway.
Well, that was a photo.
It was, and we think it was sabotage because that happened exactly at noon, 12 o'clock, And about 3 o'clock, a German reconnaissance plane flew over, and we figured they were checking up on what had happened. Well, we didn't get too many aircraft around, and there wasn't really any other than from the ships themselves.
You were mentioning that the stern of that ship was blown ashore.
Yeah. And
people were still in it?
There had to be, because after a while it started to smell pretty badly. Our base, we had 2 big Nissen huts. One was for naval equipment, the other was for food, and both of those Nissen huts were burned to the ground. Our base officers themselves, some of the officers were slightly injured in the explosion, and we were 500 yards from where the explosion occurred. And we had, I think, 7 people killed altogether.
7 British people?
Yeah, plus 1 German woman who was a typist in the office. In the docks themselves, there was a South African work battalion, and they were just changing over shifts, and they're in the basement of a building, and that building collapsed on top of them, and they never did get the bodies out. They just sealed the top, pumped in lime and sealed the top over. Well, we were outside. The explosion happened. It was finished. Then we went to clear some bombs off the dock. There were bombs that were just lying there, being unloaded from some other ship, and we went to move those. Oh, it was interesting. I'd get up in the morning, have some breakfast, sometimes, because most of the food we got was dehydrated and I didn't like it, so I would skip breakfast and go into my office. And one of the drivers, an Italian man named Cataldo, I'd ask him to get me some eggs, hard-boiled eggs, and he'd bring me in maybe half a dozen or so, and that would be my breakfast. And in the meantime, I'd be getting the chits from different departments, asking for transport for certain reasons. Then I had to allocate whatever the correct vehicle will be, and the driver to answer the call. We weren't allowed to have headlights shining. We all had masks on the headlights. But the Americans, they had bright lights shining on the trucks. They didn't seem to care.
Did you learn to speak Italian?
Un poco? Si? A little, yeah. I learned enough to get by with the drivers and so on. Well, no, in Barry, I was still there in VE Day. And the base had been sort of closing down slowly prior to VE Day. And so the transport section was disbanded. So I transferred myself to the signals department, and I rode a motorbike as a dispatch rider, if you want to call it that. And because we were doing that, there was 4 of us. We got our rum ration was neat, and we saved it. We knew that VE Day was going to happen, so we saved it. So on VE night, we each had a bottle, a 26-ouncer full of rum, neat. And the morning after, they were all empty. And it was fine until I had a good drink of water. And for 3 days, I felt the effect. I didn't drink much rum. I haven't drunk rum since, not to any degree. I was on a gun crew. I was in the ammunition locker. And my job was a talker on a Bofors gun. And we were just in the ammunition locker.
And what did the talker do?
Well, relayed the instructions from the fire director. Yeah, like cease fire, whatever, fire, whatever the target was.
Well, you had some quite unique experiences.
Yeah, quite a different thing. I must admit, I enjoyed my time in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a gentleman who you might know, Frank Curry, who wrote several books. He said, a terrible thing is war, and what it has done to us. Do you agree?
For some people, yes. In my own case, I was fine. I wasn't affected mentally. I wasn't sure whether I wanted to stay in the Navy or not. When I was being demobilized, the interviewing officer asked me if I would sign up for 5 years and be sent to an officer training school, and I said, no, I don't think so. I went home. I'm sorry about that. That was an error, because when I've been For the previous 6 months, I've been in the south of France, driving an acting Commodore, living in a big villa, eating well, seeing the country. And when I got home, I got into my little hometown in northern England at 7:30 in the morning. And the hometown was, those days, was dirty, sooty, noisy. And when I got off the train and saw this, I thought, what the so-and-so have I done? If I'd been given some leave before being demobbed, I would have gone back in. Yeah.
Where was that little town?
In Lancashire, a little town called Accrington. I left England in 1957 when I was 32, and I never had reason to contact them. And I still don't contact them, because being English in Canada, we don't get anything anyway, and we don't get anything from the Canadian DVA either. So I've been aboard the Haida. We were just there a few weeks ago with my young grandson. We did a tour of the ship. I'd done that before when it was in Oldville Place. I went aboard a few times.
And what's your feelings when you go back aboard a ship like that?
Oh, well, I was never on a destroyer. And the Haida is quite different to an escort carrier. But it's interesting. I mean, you get the feeling of Navy. Yeah.
Very good. Is there anything you'd like to add to the school children who will be seeing this?
Only to say that I and many others did this for a good reason. We felt we had to fight against a thing that was evil. And I would hope that the present kids in school will never have to face it again.
Thank you very much, Dennis. That was very kind and very nice to be able to do this. And I hope you have a very happy and prosperous life in the future.
Thank you.